Hello and welcome to the St. Baldrick's Impact Series. I'm your host, Kathleen Ruddy, and in honor of Father's Day, our guest today is a wonderful dad, Troy Jensen. Troy began working with St. Baldrick's approximately 16 years ago as an early mastermind behind our website at our partner, Firespring. Through his day job, he developed a real passion for helping kids with cancer. Together with his wife, Wendy, they became dedicated volunteer leaders and 5-time Shavies. And after many years of professional and volunteer service, their own teenage son was diagnosed with a type of bone cancer called osteosarcoma. Today, because of research, Peter has no evidence of disease. Troy's here to share his family's remarkable journey. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you.
So glad you're here, Troy. So let's jump right in. Troy, in your work, you've partnered with many charities to help them build their online presence and facilitate fundraising. But what struck you as different about St. Baldrick's when you first learned about us, and what compelled you to get involved as a volunteer yourself?
Yeah, so as you said, I started working with St. Baldrick's. 2005 was my initial conversations when we started working, kind of looking at the project. And so Firespring does work for a lot of nonprofit organizations, do website marketing and fundraising solutions and whatnot. And St. Baldrick's submitted an RFP with a really ambitious web-based fundraising platform. What struck me and was so compelling about it was that you see a lot of organizations that have really strong missions. They really believe in what they're doing, but they don't quite figure out how to do it. They don't really understand like what's the best way to go about it. And St. Baldrick's really had a clear vision for what they wanted to do, what you wanted to do, and how you wanted to achieve it. And that really, it struck me as something unique when I started working with you.
Nice. Well, that's good to hear. I hope we can carry that out through until we have accomplished our mission in its entirety. So after being part of St. Baldrick's, I'll call it the headquarters team, even though we're in different in different locations, as well as a volunteer for so long, I've got to imagine, Troy, that it was a complete shock to you to hear the words, your son has cancer. And I've heard so many things from parents over the years about how they react in that moment and what goes through their mind. What went through yours?
Yeah, so this is probably going to sound a little strange, maybe not. But what honestly went through my head at the time was just the sheer statistical improbability of it. And so I'm a person, I tend to rely on logic and probability. I work through problems and solutions, figure out a path forward, those kind of things. And with this, I just had a really hard time accepting it. I think with osteosarcoma, there are like 1,000 cases a year, about half of which I think are kids. So you think about 500 cases a year is a statistical improbability already. But then the fact that I'd been working with St. Baldrick's Foundation on trying to raise money for childhood cancer research and spent so much of our time over the previous 14 years of my son's life, I couldn't figure out how to make that work in my head. I just could not mentally sort of acknowledge it. And I struggled with that for a long time. I'm not sure I still have an answer, but it was my first reaction to it was like, this, it simply can't be that the math is just too absurd for me to sort of figure out. I know that sounds weird. It's kind of a logical or an anti-logical response rather than the emotional, like, oh my gosh, my son has cancer. But honestly, that's where I was at the time.
It's definitely the first time I've heard that specifically, but I have recently been hearing from several people that who were involved in some way before a diagnosis impacted them or their family member. So that part, it's statistically, yes, it's still rare in the world of cancer, but it's not so rare anymore. And I think that's one of the things we're grappling with. And it feels like when you're in the work, as you and I have been for so long, it starts to feel like everybody you know is impacted, obviously. But for you, I completely understand what you're saying, and it's a sobering thought. So Peter, at his diagnosis, was old enough to understand what that diagnosis meant and the risks it carried. Can you tell us a little about the treatment plan for him when he was diagnosed, and how he reacted to it and what he thought and said to you?
Yeah, So he was 14 at the time. So it was 2.5 years ago. He's almost 17 now. So his treatment plan consisted of 19 rounds of chemotherapy based on 2 different drugs over the course of about 8 months. Each round of chemo was 4 to 6 day stay in the hospital, and then he'd typically have 3 weeks on and 1 week off for his body to recover. After about 4 months of chemo, he had his first surgery, which essentially removed about 10.5 inches out of his femur and replaced it with a cadaver bone and 2 steel plates. He ended up needing a second round of surgery as well for a bone graft and a third plate to reinforce the original one. Over the course of about 9 months, he spent about 125 days in the hospital, which also happened to be during COVID. So we had to be doubly vigilant about kind of avoiding exposure with his compromised immune system and whatnot. He didn't have long to respond to react to the treatment plan. It was less than a week between his diagnosis and when he was admitted for his first round of chemo, and then it basically just got more difficult with each passing week. Within that, we really we didn't have any conceivable idea of how hard the chemo would be on him and kind of the impact it would have. And everything sort of became week to week, treatment to treatment. And by the end of it, we were all just kind of trying to get through the end of the day. So he really didn't have a chance to react until after treatment, really. And that's where he started to kind of I think, process it. During the treatment, it was just happening full on. And really none of us had really much of a chance to react.
That's interesting. I think we've all heard about adults who've received a cancer diagnosis and they say, well, doc, I've got a vacation plan. The doc says, oh, go on your vacation, you'll be fine. And with kids, you never hear that kind of story because they probably test for everything else before cancer because it's statistically more likely to be something else.
Yeah.
And so it's more advanced when they get it and so forth. That's, it doesn't give you much time to wrap your head around it and prepare, but maybe that is a blessing in another way. But tell us more about Peter and his interests and how his diagnosis may have changed his life, at least for a while.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, Peter hates me and Wendy talking about him. He hates for us to draw attention to him in any way. And in many ways, he's a normal 16-year-old boy. He has bad hair days and trying to figure out what he wants to do after he graduates high school and those kinds of things. But I don't really know how it changed him as an individual. He sort of came into his own during treatment. All right, it's very sort of formative years from that period of time, coming into high school. And then again, it was during COVID too. So that had a huge impact on the world at that time point. So I don't really know how it changed him, but I can tell you he's the most resilient human I've ever met. He just, at this point, he's been through so much and just, it takes a kicking and keeps on ticking. He just keeps moving forward. So it's really impressive and I'm a dad, so I can't help but think that way. But it's really impressive to see him now and how he has really excelled in every way possible throughout all of this.
Well, I know in general, and I'm stereotyping here, dads love to fix things. And I know about you, Troy, that you definitely are a problem solver. But cancer isn't something you can, take out to your workshop and fix on the tool bench. Did this make you view your role as a father differently and how you approached fathering your son in that journey?
Yeah, I'm not sure it made me view my role differently, but it certainly changed my own perspective on what's important. And that has had an impact on how I parent. And it's more about me than it is about him at that point. I am a perfectionist in general, a little bit of a control freak, a type A in a lot of ways. I work very hard on planning and ensuring everything goes accordingly. It's what I do for my job. It's how I'm wired. It's just those things that come natural to me. And Peter's diagnosis and treatment, really, it made me realize it wasn't possible through all of that. Like I had to come to terms, like this is out of my control. I can't fix this. I can't. There is no solution for me. I can only just be a part of it. It's happening, and I can engage in the best way I can, but I can't fix it, and that it really was hard. John Lennon was right that life is what happens while you're busy making other plans, and I lived that throughout the treatment because I had a hard time just going along with it without being able to really influence the outcome, other than just try and make it easier for Peter. That was really the only goal that I had at that point, was how do I make it easier for him, because it's happening.
So kind of going back to something we were talking about a couple minutes ago, and about not having a lot of time to process and just having to jump right in. I think there are situations in life that human beings encounter, and maybe they're molehills and we make mountains of them. But then when we really encounter a mountain, like is the case with a cancer diagnosis, you don't have a choice. You can't size it. You just have to rally and climb the darn mountain, right? And do you think your family views challenges, or what other people would see as challenges that maybe aren't as daunting now to you? Do you think you view adversity differently now because of this experience?
I think we try to, and honestly, we don't feel like we're quite over the mountain yet. So there we're still feeling some residuals of his treatment. He actually fell last December and broke some of the hardware in his prosthetic. So he's actually got a third surgery scheduled in about 3 weeks now, that they're going to basically go in and take out the cadaver and steel plates and replace it with a 3D printed prosthetic that goes into. This is technology that didn't exist 2 years ago, and the treatment options are advancing so quickly with technology and those kind of things. I have to imagine sometimes like the work that St. Baldrick is doing directly helped my son in his treatment, like the research that's going on right now. But sometimes it doesn't feel like we're quite over that mountain. So we just have to keep going forward. That's all it is. Like we look back now, and if Peter's struggling with something, he still does. He's still on crutches, and he hates it. He hates being the odd kid out, always those kinds of things, until we get through this next round of surgery. And we look back and say, look, you've already been through all of this. Like this is the easy part. Like this is like, even with his surgery, it's basically starting over with the surgery components. But the first time he had surgery, he was 4 months into chemo and couldn't. He was so weak he couldn't unscrew the lid off of a water bottle when he was in the hospital. Whereas now he's really strong and he's really motivated, and so we're optimistic that this round's going to go a lot more smoothly, and his recovery is going to be a lot faster because you're going to be able to actually engage in the PT and those kinds of things that we need to get through it. So I think we try to. We don't always get there. It's not always easy still, but we try and look at what he's already been through and we've already been through in order to get through the next whatever it is.
Well, we're going to be thinking about Peter and all of you and rooting for him and looking for good updates in 3 weeks' time. Looking back on this journey and maybe who you were at the time of Peter's diagnosis, what advice would you give your earlier self, or what would you tell another dad who just learned his child has cancer?
Yeah, this was a hard one for me to consider. I think the biggest challenge was that I had no idea how hard it would actually be. I think it's cancer, it's bad, right? And you even knowing somebody else who goes through it and being kind of connected to it secondhand. But after watching Peter going through it, I don't think it's possible to truly understand how hard it is when you're in the middle of it. And going into it, if I were to look back, I would say just let go of the rest of it. Like just it's hard enough as it is for you to fixate or to worry about details that, as I said, I come to realize that there's a whole lot of things that don't matter in life that you can get wrapped around the axle on and kind of fixated on, and it doesn't matter. And especially in this case, if your son or daughter is going through a treatment, just make it as easy as possible for them. Because as hard as it is for you, it's worse for them. And so that's the advice I would give anybody going into this. Just know it's going to be hard, and let yourself give yourself some grace with all the other stuff in life, and focus on what really matters, which is your child at the moment.
That is beautiful wisdom, right there from the front line of pediatric cancer. That is really powerful, Troy. I want to say, it seems you're in this fight with your son in every possible way. And I really thank you for the honor of hearing this from you, and you be willing to share this with us.
I'm grateful for all of the work that St. Baldrick's is doing in the effort.
So to our audience, please share this episode on your social channels, because it's so timely and so apt for Father's Day. And tune in next time to meet St. Baldrick's Ambassador Hannah Jorgensen, because research is hope, and you are the givers of hope to kids with cancer. Learn how at stbaldricks.org, and happy Father's Day.